The way to Hello, Colombia and South Carolina and the world. Welcome to Frame by Frame. My name is Ome. I'm one of the organizers of Frame by Frame, and it's a film club, and it's a collaborative project between laid-off employees of the Columbia Film Society with support from previous employees who voluntarily left the organization. And we collectively believe that independent film and media is a catalyst for critical conversations and dialogue in our community. So we wanted to amplify the voices that have been historically marginalized in South Carolina, both in the industry and in the arts and beyond. So we want to continue kind of the work that we were doing when we were part of the CFS that's kind of not done now. And this month, very excitingly, we have a partnership with the Richland Library. So the Richland Library, of course, is our county library, and they are the amazing institution that gives us all free access to Canopy. And Canopy, of course, is where we watch the films. We're a frame by frame film club. Again, we want to keep this experience accessible, right? So you don't have to pay to watch the films. You don't have to pay to join the stream to ask questions and whatnot. That is real big part of what we see kind of lacking in the art market here in Columbia. So this month, you all watch Who Streets, and we're going to let the Richland Library folks take over the conversation. I'm just really excited to introduce two people who I absolutely love working with over the past couple of years. They really bring an energy and a creativity and an excitement to Columbia. So first is Keith Brinkmann, who is an associate in film and sound at the Richland Library. Keith and I have actually put together now, I think, 3 film series. Is it 3?
We did Spike Lee, Agnes Varda, and did we do the 1999, Like It's 1999 one together?
Yeah,
that was good.
Yeah, so 3 great film series. And so Keith is really ideal to be part of this project. And also Crush Rush, who is an amazing photographer in Columbia and is also now the resident
artist in residence. Richland Library, artist in residence. The AIR.
So I will let them take over the conversation. Just a few kind of housekeeping notes. Please follow us on your favorite social medias, Frame by Frame Film Club. And also check out our website, framebyframefilmclub.wordpress.com. And you can get all the upcoming films that are happening in the club. We meet once a month to chat. And I'll come back at the end of the conversation and tell you what we have for next month. So take it away, Keith and Crush.
Well, thank you so much, Ome. It's great seeing you again. And I'm really glad we get a chance to have your movie next month, which we will preview at the end of this month's meeting. So Who Streets, excellent film, directed by Saba Folayan, co-directed by Damon Davis. There's this one video I saw them do some interview where they kind of talk about the impetus behind the film and how they wanted to have community authorship. And I think it'd be great if we could watch that clip as kind of like an introduction to our discussion today.
Absolutely. Came up. Let's see. I saw it temporarily, and then
something happened
temporarily.
Well, basically,
and I'm Damon Davis.
Here we go.
There it is.
The directors of Who Streets. So Who Streets chronicles the uprising that happened in Ferguson following the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown Jr. For me, it was really important to collaborate with someone who was from the community, who knew the community outside of this moment.
Being that I'm from St. Louis, I was born and raised there, I wanted to make sure that a much more accurate portrayal of who the people were that were out there got out.
From the first interview that we recorded, we realized that there was so much that was going unsaid, so much that wasn't being discussed on the news when the issue of police brutality and Black Lives Matter would come up.
Good evening. The images from this weekend of violence in the streets, stores being looted.
Crowds of people breaking into stores along West Florissant overnight.
The police chief of St. Louis County told the reporters the violence is destroying this city.
You see bottles of booze come out, a lot of open containers. You see people smoking a little dope. And I hate to keep bringing that up every night, but it really does become part of the mix.
People, storytellers, were parachuting in, getting the perspective that they could in a really short amount of time and leaving. This was also contributing to the frustration that people were feeling on the ground. Not only were they not getting justice, but they were also being misrepresented in their attempts to do that. We wanted to create a platform where people of color, Black activists would have the opportunity to get their perspective heard. We wanted to take the conversation out of this really charged kind of polarized rhetoric and bring it back to a really human place.
I was just blown away by the sense of community. Black, white, everyone coming together for this common cause.
People from the Black middle class, people from the hood driving by, honking their horns, supportive. I get chills just thinking of it now.
A lot of people didn't do it justice when they put it on their timeline, because when you're in the heart of it, you get to see faces and you get to feel that Black love.
I hope Who Streets open up a door to understanding that people are equipped to tell their own story.
The media tends to prioritize members of, public officials or members of the police and take their statements at face value and not recognize the statements of everyday people as equally valuable. And that is the challenge that we hope this film poses to other storytellers in covering these kinds of issues.
All right. Well, I just, thought that would be a good kind of segue into our discussion of the film. I guess to give you guys kind of a picture into our selection process, I kind of presented Crush with kind of 7 choices in Canopy, and we kind of went from there. And he was really, he loved Who Streets, and I checked it out, and I totally concurred. And that was our pick. What was something that really stood out to you from the film, Crush?
Yeah, sure. So, my thing is with Who Streets, I actually watched it on the big screen for the first time at a showing at the Nick. What really stuck out to me as a photojournalist was how real it was. As a storyteller, as a photojournalist, I'm tasked with showing people how real these things are. And I think that as being, the icon that I am in the community, that people expect that from me. It's easy to see some of the, my colleagues, the news stations, they're doing great work, but at the same time, they may not necessarily be out there the full time. There's more to it, So seeing the community lead the narrative, seeing the community, maintain the dialogue throughout the whole film was just very, very powerful to me. I think that's something that we really, really need to see, especially when it's things related around protests and riots. Like they said in the clip that we just saw, a lot of times we take things that officials may have said or heard as face value, or if we see the pretty face, the nice suit, we look at those people as fact tellers all the time and direct figures, and what they say goes. So it's always, I tell people all the time that people like me and my colleagues, like Sean Rayford, Thomas Hammond, all even the people in the upstate, lower state, we're out here telling a story, and we're doing our jobs to be as precise as possible. And we're doing it so you can watch and fully be confident in the narrative that you're seeing from the comfort of your home. So to me, that's a very powerful thing. And, we all saw what happened in Ferguson. We all saw the news reports. We all saw the social media. But did we really, really see what was going on? And I think Who Street is powerful because we get to see what was really, really going on. We get to see people. We don't get to see an event. We get to see people. And I think that the way that we can truly change America and change the narrative is that we start looking at things, looking at people, and instead of things. We have to understand that we are living, breathing, feeling, emotional beings that are a part of these tragic events.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of those people.
Mhm.
So Saba Folayan, the director, was actually from New York, and she at first came to write stories about what was happening in Ferguson, and she was just so struck by the, discordance between the news media presentation and the actual reality. And so she invited a friend from college, Lucas Alvarado Ferrar, but then they were looking for somebody from the Ferguson community to help them. And Damon Davis was actually there at the protest, was a local artist that they, the co-director of the
Right.
film. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And even the people that they interviewed, you have David Witt, who actually lived at Canfield Green Apartments. He's the gentleman who starts Cop Watch.
Right, right, right.
I thought he was an excellent figure. Um, there's one point where he talks about kind of going out to the protests unarmed, and he says,
Right.
"Well, the camera is my weapon," and it's almost as if the documentary that's a statement about the documentary itself, where the
Right.
documentary it's not sort of taking this dry outsider view hovering over the Ferguson protests and the uprising. It's sort of from within,
Right.
and that kind of gives it a very unique flavor.
There's a huge difference, you take in consideration like nowadays with how many people have drones, you can say, oh my gosh, look at the numbers. But looking at a picture from above, which is essentially what happens a lot of times now, not physically, but theoretically, we look at the top down version of it, but actually being in the heart of it, being in the moment and seeing is a completely different perspective. And that's one thing I like to talk about. I like to talk about perspective, and perspective changes everything. Because if you have photos that are right there in the moment, even though you're not physically meeting people where they stand, you're there. You can see it, you can feel it. Photos are very, very powerful. And now when a lot of people using video, you can hear, you know, you can feel it. And that's what it's all about. We have to feel these things, because if you don't feel them, there really is no inclination. There's no reason that you would change if you can't feel what another group of people might be dealing with, what a community might be dealing with. You have to really connect on a human element.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I felt like even this summer, the news media almost was a little more engaged with the protests and the uprisings around the country than they were 4 years ago. And by getting more, even some of the news media, by getting more embedded with the crowds, started getting under fire themselves.
Right.
Became targets of the police. And you kind of, once you put yourself in there, you kind of realize, it's kind of everyone's fair game sometimes
Everyone's
for the
fair
police.
game. Yes. So, I look at it this way. So what happened is, the situation with George Floyd was nothing that hadn't happened before. But everything was different because of the simple fact that because of the pandemic, America was at a standstill.
Yeah, we were all watching.
We were all watching. There were no sports distractions. There was no school. There was no meaning. People were locked down, and all we had to do was sit down and watch. And the world watched George Floyd take his last moments. Like everybody watched it. There was
yeah.
The field, the stage was huge. And I think that's what made the difference between now and 4 years ago, because we were forced to watch. We were forced to watch the humanity seep away from this man. So, things were not, the circumstances weren't different. And I truly believe, unfortunately, I truly believe that if there was no pandemic, that this would have just been another name on a t-shirt, another name on a chalkboard, but things happen for a reason. Things happen for a reason. And because of that, the chain of events, America is changed because
Well,
of
and
that.
it wasn't just one. It wasn't just George Floyd. It was like Ahmaud Arbery,
Right.
The Cooper lady who called the gentleman named Cooper. I can't remember their first names right now.
Yeah.
But the thing in the Central Park, And of course, you had the tragic death of Breonna Taylor.
Right.
And I thought even Rayshard Brooks, his death in Atlanta is very similar to Michael Brown.
Right.
Where if they didn't have the video of what happened to Rayshard Brooks, the cop could just say, "Oh, well, he had the taser,
Right.
so
that's
I'm
it.
justified." But in this case, at the very least, they had it on several videos and the body cam, and so they could see that like he's running away. There's no reason for this
there was
cop
no
to
reason.
shoot him.
Yeah. It's a common thing. People wonder why there is such a strain, and like as you see in Who's Street, why is there such a strain between the police departments, the police agencies, and the communities, specifically the Black communities, because history has shown that there has always been that power struggle. There has always been the over policing of the Black communities. There's always been the suppressions of evidence. There's always been a body cam that is conveniently not worked. There's always been a dash cam that malfunctioned just randomly on this day and Tuesday, like for no apparent reason. So that's why Who's Streets is so important, because you get to see that power struggle in real time. You get to see, at one point in the film, the gentleman's like, "This is my house. This is my this is my property." Like you're encroaching our area.
We saw that happen this summer too.
Right. And it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And there's always a place for law enforcement, but there's an even greater place for proper law enforcement. And so it's just, that's why Who's Street is such a powerful documentary, because you see so many of the elements that we're marching and protesting about right now. And it looks similar. It looks not similar. It looks exactly the same now as it did then, as it did before, and as it did when my parents were marching around, my grandparents. So that's why this is a very strong film in its entirety from top to bottom. Even when we go look at when they start moving on with the community leaders, and the gentleman is like, where were you members of clergy when we were out marching around?
That's a great scene right there.
That is still the dialogue today. Those questions are always,
And that's also, you have the NAACP leader who is kind of giving a frame to the events.
Right.
And then the people in the crowds, and he says something about the young activists and he kind of praises them. But then people from the crowd are like, let those people speak.
Let them speak.
And that, I think, that's a very powerful moment where it kind of ties back into what the film is trying to do. It's trying to give a voice to those people that the national media might not give a stage to, regularly.
Well, it's also another thing that goes into the politics of respectability is like, the older generation of activists, I wouldn't say all of them, but have all catered around this idea that we have to act a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way, so we can demand the bare minimum of respect in America. So that scene in Who's Streets is a powerful assessment. Like, let them speak, let them be real, let them be heard. Because what happens is when you have all these outbursts, when you have these riots, they come from people who have been emotionally suppressed. It's at our core, humans, we are animals. And a lot of people forget that we're just very advanced animals. But if you back an animal into a corner, it's going to come out. That feeling is fight or flight every time. And at our core, that is our wiring. So, you got to let people speak. You got to let people be real, because not everybody has the suit and tie. Not everybody has the extensive vocabulary to be considered as respectable or worthy of a listen. Although, even though they may be saying it differently in a different dialect, might be using, ebonics, but they're still saying the same thing. And if you open your ears, you can be receptive to that message.
Well, that's actually, there's a clip. There's very insightful clip where we're talking about the conflict between tactics between the kind of old generation and the new generation, and that it's Tef Poe is the one at the NAACP meeting who says, "This ain't your daddy's civil rights movement."
That's right.
And you can kind of get in this clip. What what I titled Revolutionary Act, you can kind of get a taste of kind of where some of those conflicts might lie.
Are we gonna run the clip?
I'm hoping. Oh, there it goes.
Here we go.
They say that a building burning is worse than a black person getting shot, right? Because this building serviced white people and this black body did not. A building's a building. You can rebuild a building. You can't resuscitate a life after it lies on the ground for 4.5 hours with 8 bullets in it. And so I don't consider that violence, right? Like, I consider that a righteous, non-violent direct action. The question that solidifies violence to me were there any people harmed? Did any people die? Like, that qualifies violence. A building is a building. That's a revolutionary act. That's strategic.
They don't tell you the fact that the police showed up to a peaceful candlelight vigil of just a bunch of people holding up candles because they hurt, and boxed them in and forced them onto a Quick Trip lot. They put property over people and say, we got a problem in St. Louis because a Quick Trip burned down. But ain't no alchemist, no doctor, no wizard on this planet can bring back Mike Brown Jr.
I'm a mother of 5. I'm a grandmother of 5. That mother lost her child. If we don't come together now, when? And for the ones who have their feet on people's necks, when do you feel like enough is enough? Because you got to know that when you keep pushing somebody up in the corner, they're going to come out swinging. Well, we swing.
Yeah, so I feel like, so that's at the beginning of that clip, you hear Kayla Reed, who was a local activist at the time, who's gone on to do even larger things nationally for the movement for Black Lives and lots of other organizations. But she's kind of talking about this conflict that we heard a lot of this summer, where people would focus on the damage to property.
Right.
And a lot of times that can be a generational gap where it's like, you know, that's not the right way to protest. That's not, you know, that's not what worked for previous generations of, you know, civil rights movement. But then you have this kind of newer generation, which maybe is not telling people to go do that stuff, but saying this is kind of like an expression. This sort of happens, you know.
Right.
And it's not. It shouldn't be what it's focused on when when it's a reaction to somebody who gets killed.
Right. A riot is the language of the unheard.
That's right. That's right.
And you know, and it's you know, I am constantly at war with myself regarding that, because on one hand, you look at a lot of places that are poor communities that are burning, and they're burning their own communities, and it's like, what do you have left once your community burns? Where do you start from? But on the other hand, I'm like, I can completely understand why you feel this way. I can completely understand why you have this frustration and anger, because you don't feel like anything in this community belongs to you or your people.
Exactly.
You don't feel like anything in this community is serving you for their benefit. And then you see all the people that are investing money in this community. A lot of times they're investing money into these communities at the detriment of you, because now your property taxes are going up. Now gentrification is happening. And we all know what happens for that point. But it's like, I'm at a constant battle, because it's like, I can understand, but at the same time, if you don't have a community, you don't have hope. But if you don't have hope, you don't have a community. It's like, it's just, you know, it's a very hard thing. And like, fast forward to what I experienced as being a photojournalist here in Columbia, you know, just on May 30th and May 31st, you know, just seeing from the beginning, the march, seeing how peaceful it was, you know, the rally at the State House, seeing how peaceful it was, and then another march, and then seeing things, you know, decline till, you know, the incident that we had at night on May 30th. You know, so it's really, really hard, because guess what, all the focus was on? All the focus was on the damage. Nobody talked about how there was hours on end. It started in the morning to the late afternoon before it ever got negative. Nobody talked about, and
It
that's
almost makes you wonder, especially in the case of Ferguson, would the news media have even reported that much on the event if not for the gas station getting burned down and for the uprising that occurred? And this is a conflict that goes back all the way back to the Watts riots or the Watts uprising, where people, at the time disagreed, like years after disagreed, like, well, maybe that actually did bring some change, even if it's not, the best way to go about things. We want to remind everyone to add your comments and your thoughts to the chat box.
Hey.
All right. Hey, Debbie.
Glad to have you, Debbie. Absolutely. If y'all have any questions, any comments, anything you want to address, me being a photojournalist here in the city and, keep with all this film literally, you just please feel free to reach out, drop a question in the comment section. We'd love to get to it. But yeah, it's just, it's really hard, trying to figure out what the revolution looks like. What are the tools of the revolution? Because people's minds and ideas change rapidly. It's hard. It's getting through things because you look at, hey, look, well, this is successful. This was a successful thing that we did in the 50s and 60s. But then you question, it's like, well, if it's 2020 and we still complaining about the same thing, was it truly a successful tactic? So then it's like people start getting creative. Well, we saw that this worked.
Yeah, well, it's like maybe that disrupted society back then. Maybe the level of disruption with the bus boycotts and marching on Washington, maybe that was enough to make people stand up and listen. But maybe now things like there's more direct, maybe like lying in the street or going to the shopping mall and kind of making people confront the fact, even blocking the interstate at one point where, Brittany Farrell gets arrested doing that. Maybe, I mean, like you can't argue with the results for Ferguson. They actually have had some changes there.
Yes. Change in policy, change in politicians, change in community activism. Absolutely. Organizations have spawned from that. So yeah, it's a thing. And one thing about it is too, over time, America has become very, when things happen in America, America has this thing that it does that it becomes, I wouldn't say immune to it, but it's not as effective. People seem to care less. It's easy to forget things that don't absolutely disturb you. People being uncomfortable while shopping is a whole thing. You go into Walmart screaming out Black Lives Matter, they're going to remember that. But like, if we're going to say, hey, we're going to boycott this, all the other people that are not a part of the boycott could absolutely care less.
Yeah.
Like they could care less.
You do have to be strategic about what you're doing.
Like if I could care less about the Black Lives Matter movement and I was, not caring about any boycott, I would be like, oh, they're boycotting? Oh, great. That means I have more. I don't have to worry about supply and demand because so it's like you have to be creative in the way that you navigate protesting nowadays. It has to be strategic, like you said. It has to be a thought because you have to make people uncomfortable sometimes. And that's the only way, because even though we're all on social media, even though there's websites and news networks that are infused in our social media, ultimately you see what you want to see. Every time you click on a link or share something, the algorithms cater it more to what your views are.
Oh, absolutely.
So over time, your social media doesn't even become, it just becomes the echo chamber of your own ideas. It doesn't ever show you anything different. And then you get the opportunity. You know what? I don't like what Keith's talking about. As a matter of fact, I haven't liked Keith's last 4 posts. So I'm just getting rid of Keith. Like Keith no longer exists. So that's why I think that, you have to be really, really, really creative and make it undeniable about your presence.
Well, and you have situations like close to St. Louis, you have the McCloskeys who
Right.
are so afraid of demonstrations that they are waving guns at people
Right.
walking through their neighborhood on the way to the governor's.
Right. Right. And it's crazy. You even look at that, how so many things have changed. I mean, society, if you wave, if we go out waving guns at any point ever, we're not, that's going to be irresponsible. Gun toting, that's not how you handle a firearm. You don't do that. But because of the polarization and the politics based around the Black Lives Matter movement, they are now being paraded and championed around.
Yeah.
And that
definitely changed since 4 years ago, because
Right.
it was considered more controversial. I'm not even sure. There wasn't definitely not as many public figures or political figures kind of voicing support for it as there is now.
Right. And
Where
so
now it's more across the spectrum,
right.
especially this summer.
And that's the polarization of politics, and not just politics, but American ideas. And I think that becomes very dangerous, that we have to have a flavor of social ideas to identify with the like if you're very conservative, you have to like X, Y, and Z. And if you do not, then you are part of the problem. I think that is very dangerous. And what I really, really liked in Who Streets, where it showed that there were people coming out from different walks of life. You saw black people, white people, Asian, Hispanics, everybody was there together. You don't know what their creeds and values are, but they came back together as a community because that's something that happened in their community. And things like that are even changing nowadays for the worse, unfortunately. And that's just crazy to me, Keith. It's crazy.
I agree. Well, we have an interesting comment, a question in the chat here from Kristen Morris. What role do you think the prevalence of cameras and recording equipment have in uprising and protests in the past decade or so? I mean, definitely this summer, I don't know about you, but I was definitely transfixed on watching these videos come in. Just seeing the actions around the country, seeing kind of like the police. There's, police brutality, like in reaction to the protests. You get to see so many videos of these cases where it just kind of makes your eyes bulge watching the police behave in this way.
Well, as a person who is definitely loves the camera, love using the camera to document things, I think that there's two sides to every coin. The camera is an amazing tool, but that camera can also become a part that adds to the negativity. And the reason I say that is, the camera can make people, when people get in front of a camera, they become actors in a sense. The camera can be, the pathway to people being inauthentic. The camera you will see people who will get in front of the camera, they will say X, Y, and Z, and when the camera goes off, they're a completely different person. Another thing that the camera does too, that which directly affects the younger generation, is people want to go viral. So that may be a negative thing, like we saw here in Columbia, that the gentleman was breaking out the window with the sunlight down at Aloft, the hotel. Would he have done that if nobody was watching and there was no camera to show him doing that? These are all questions that I think, and so while showing the reality of what's happening in the world around me, I'm very, very particular about feeling the energy and feeling that if I'm covering these things, if I point my camera in a certain direction, will that change the atmosphere just simply because I'm there and pointing my camera? It's just, the camera is the greatest tool, but it can also be a tool to make people act at their best and at their worst.
I feel like this would be a great opportunity to share with our viewers here some of the work that you actually did this summer. We have a link here.
So this link, it shows the timeline of the photos, and if you scroll through, you'll see where I have day 1 and day 2. So like when I was talking about in the beginning, where people don't talk about this was for the walk down to the State House, and you see everybody's marching down to the State House all the way from City Hall, and it's just it was peaceful, 100% peaceful. There's even some photos in there that on the way back you'll see police interacting with the protesters. So nobody, this wasn't the focus once the chaos happened later on. But as you see, it's a lot of beautiful images. There's a lot of people who have beautiful signs and beautiful messages and emotions and feelings. And then, things change. As you see, the gentleman, shaking the officer's hand, and this is as they're making their way to the police department. And it just changes. It changes. This is when the road was blocked off right in front of Richland Library. And then now they've made their way to the police department. And as you see, even that changed. Police officers came out initially, there were no shields, and then one water bottle flew, and that's when everything that's all it took was one water bottle.
Was there any tear gas used or any kind of militarized tactics like that?
Yes. So once everything really, really got bad, that's when the gas came out. It initially started as smoke canisters, because a lot of people don't really know the difference when they see a smoke canister fired off and a tear gas canister, so they automatically disperse. But as you see, everything changed very, very fast. The energy changed very fast, and then you end up with what you have. Yeah. And so just things, it was a rapid, it went from one water bottle changed everything. Now you take in consideration, you think about law enforcement, it's like, why did one water bottle elicit a response of the riot gear coming out? You as an officer, your life is in danger from far more dangerous things. Why did you have to have the response from a water? Why did a water bottle be enough to shift the dialogue about how you were policing people?
Well, and it's almost like when the police then come out with the riot gear and shooting the smoke and the gas, it almost like makes the people in the crowd kind of react
Absolutely.
in certain ways, and they kind of feel like they're under attack.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you see here, like,
we definitely saw that in Whose Streets for sure.
Right, and they were shooting the canisters into traffic, so there was a lot of issues. And this is day 2 that's coming up when one of the images that I made that it went extremely viral, that was even people shared it around and even saying that it was Portland. So as you see, there's a less lethal shotgun trained very close at a
point
young
blank range.
Right.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of issues that happened, and it's like, what can people with signs who are clearly unarmed, why is this a response? And does this response really help people want to disperse, or does it make them want to fight back on what they may feel is a tyrannical police force that is not being checked? It's the whole reason that people were out was because of a grave mistake by law enforcement. So
right, and it's the police almost repeating the mistake that. So like in the case of Michael Brown or George Floyd or Rayshard Brooks, a lot of times the victim is then portrayed as but they were a threat,
right?
And the police officer or citizen in George Zimmerman's case, it's they kind of feel like, oh, they were afraid, and it's sort of like, I don't know.
Right. What is fear? What does fear look like? Why does fear look so differently? Why did, like I said, going back to the water bottle, if you have a group of people out here saying that, hey, we fear for our lives because of bad policing, why do you fear for your life from a water bottle?
A water bottle, yeah.
And so that sets up a whole different diet. That sets up, just like, what's really going on? And I understand that you have to protect yourself and be ready, but does protecting yourself and being ready as an agency, does that, when you protect yourself, are you antagonizing? Does it, because if there's peaceful protests going on, and you might hear some flavorful language, but ultimately words aren't going to do anything. But if you bring out the riot gear, then it's kind of weird. Once you bring out the riot gear, it almost like you're asking for a riot. If there's no riot and you bring out the gear, are you setting the stage? Are you preparing?
Well, in whose streets there's that moment where the governor sets a curfew,
right?
And they were already starting to push people back and kind of like move on the crowd at 10:30.
That happened here.
The curfew is at 12, and it's like, well, just giving people a chance to disperse,
Right. So on May 31st, we had the same issue here, which is on the day 2 that we just saw. So all of that happened with the woman because curfew was set for 6 p.m. It was blasted all over the news networks. It was blasted on like text things. Like the city has a 6 p.m. curfew. I think it was 3 o'clock when that line with SCDC riot squad that were pushing for people to disband and to go home. So what you have here is a group of officers who are saying, hey, look, you got to go home at 3 o'clock. But then you have a whole group of college kids and everyday citizens and activists that saying, hey, no, look, we out here to 6
got until 6.
We got,
and it's a constitutionally granted right to protest.
Right.
And if you look back, I mean, this is back to the beginning of our country.
Right.
The American Revolution, which
we started to protest.
Right.
Started to protest. Right.
It's as American as apple pie.
That's it. Protest.
Ome has a question in the chat here. What do you think the future of Black Lives Matter in Colombia is, and where are we now?
Well, I think that Black Lives Matter as a mentality is always moving forward. It is something that can never go away. You can't undo Black Lives Matter. That is a statement that we will remember for the rest of our life, our life, and our kids will remember. And over time, it is in history books. Black Lives Matter, the movement isn't going anywhere. So the future of Black Lives Matter in Colombia is infinite. Black Lives as an organization, because there's two parts. I think there's a lot that Black Lives Matter the organization has, for in Colombia and South Carolina as well. I think that there's no going back.
Absolutely.
This isn't our grandparents' revolution. Their forward progress is that's the motto. It's forward always. You can't look back, because the moment you start looking back, you start doubting. And once you have doubt, that's all it takes to disband anything. You got to believe, and you have to keep pushing forward. So, that's a great question. And I think that the future of BLM from a mind state and from an organization it has an infinite future in Colombia. And where we are now is pushing forward.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, let's see. What else should we talk about, Crush?
Well, I really liked in Whose Streets. I really liked when they were really talking about the power of community. I think that's something that we can touch on for our viewers, like community, like having different groups and organizations coming together for one common cause. And even if those organizations might have a little beef or a little bit of friction in between, like when one group of people hurts, we all hurt. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And in humanity, we really need to look at all of our weak links and strengthen them. And a lot of that comes on, with different marginalized groups. If there's one marginalized group in America, this is a grave injustice. And I think that it's really time that people come together. 2020 is hard for all of us. And one thing that, we can really look at is there was a pandemic that happened. And there were people who lost their lives who never would have imagined that would have been the end of their story. They would have never imagined that there would have been a virus that would have wiped them out unexpectedly in 2020. So if we're here, it is our duty to love each other and protect each other and rethink our values about how we're going to engage with each other, because another pandemic can come along and do the same thing. So we don't know how much time that we have here on this planet. So we really need to dig deep, dig into our hearts, and just really start upbuilding our communities. And just all this Democrat, Republican, these ideas, and having these hard lines, it has to change. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening. Everything that we saw in Who Streets, everything that I saw on May 30th, May 31st, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, all these things are going to continue happening. And America is going to become the most uncomfortable, broken country if we don't nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
We
got
have
to come
do
together.
something different. We have to come together. We got to have these. If the conversation is hard, that means it's a conversation that needs to be had. Because if the conversation is easy, that means people ain't feeling nothing. And so we just really have to dig deep and work towards just rebuilding this country.
I'm glad that you mentioned, having conversations, because one of the big missions for the library recently, we do a lot of Let's Talk Race programs.
Right.
We're trying to, be a resource for the city, for our community to discuss race, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
And so if you go to richlandlibrary.com/race, you can find a whole bunch of resources on there, book suggestions, organizations, tools. I think we have our Padlet on there. And we have a blog post from one Crush Rush that came up only a few weeks ago.
November 30th.
That's right. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to bring it up on the screen too, in that blog post, what I did was I just really talked about, we hear this statement, Black Lives Matter, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper with Black Artists Matter. If you go back and look at all of these movements, you go back and look at from the beginning of time, like even back to slavery, Black creatives led the charge into really, really, changing things. Music was used as tools for communication. Quilt makers were used to make maps. You go back and look at all the Harlem Renaissance, the Black arts movement. These artists and creatives, they really, really set the dialogue that, hey, look, we can create and use our art as powerful tools of the revolution to make people think and feel and view what we're doing in a different manner. And that is extremely powerful when it comes to civil rights. You go back and look at all of the different songs, just all of the different sounds and scenes of all of the revolution that's happened since the Black Lives Matter movement. And these things are things that will stick with you. Like in Who Street, it says, "We're gonna be all right." That's a song. That is a hip-hop song that has become it's extremely powerful. And when you go back and look when President Obama became president, there was a song by Jeezy, "My President is Black." So Black creativity has been the catalyst of really, really celebrating and issuing some serious change within the community that affects us externally. So I think that Black artists are essential, and I'm not just saying that as a Black artist. I might be a little bit biased, but it is essential for our survival. It's essential for our survival. And so that's a blog post that you all can definitely check out.
It's essential for the survival of the Black community, but just the American community as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. It's always good to see you. Thank you. Yeah, we got a little bit of time left. I wanted to know if anybody had any questions. Feel free to reach out. We can take questions for the last couple minutes. Sure. If we have anybody, our viewers out there. Anything rolling in?
All right. Well, maybe we should welcome Ome back to talk about what we're doing next week. I would like to thank the Frame by Frame Club for allowing me and Crush to
absolutely
guest host this week. It's definitely been a pleasure, and I couldn't have had a better movie to discuss. So
yes,
thank you very much.
If you haven't watched Who Streets, check it out on Canopy. Absolutely, I definitely recommend it.
Free with your library card.
Use your library card, pop some popcorn. It's a great view, and Canopy has a ton of amazing documentaries on there as well. So yes, check that out. Use Canopy and check it out.
Canopy is amazing, and you have to register through the Richland Library website. Oh, actually, before I do my little closing, Crush, we had a question. Are there any upcoming virtual events related to your artistry and residency?
Unfortunately, Steffi, my time has come to an end. All of the virtual events that I've had in my last 3 months, I do believe that they're still accessible. I did a great panel with some fellow photojournalists that I definitely recommend checking out. As a matter of fact, I'll send you a link because we are homies. So I will definitely make that happen. So
we'll post it on the Frame by, if you can send it to us too, we'll post it on the Frame by Frame social medias.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ome.
Yeah. So again, I'd like to.
I saw that one. It was very good. I was looking for the link just now, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
But it was a great program.
Thank you.
I tuned in for a bit. So I mean, we have another question. We might as well take it.
Yeah, sure.
Kathleen Hong is trying to come up with a question about modern narrative shaping by propaganda and journalism. There isn't an answer to it, but we can discuss.
Yeah. So propaganda and journalism, it's a whole thing. Propaganda is very financially lucrative for those who are looking to destabilize causes and organizations. It's so detrimental to reality that like there really is an answer, because there's always going to be two parts to every story. There's going to be the hero and the villain. And unfortunately, in America, you can never truly tell the two parts by who's the hero and who's the villain, because they're all based around societal ideas. So what may be the hero to this person may be the villain, and vice versa. So that's what I think it really goes back to, shattering those barriers and having this dialogue. Because now, thanks to social media, and I say thanks negatively, thanks to social media, people are in their bubbles. They don't know what reality looks like because they don't visit reality anymore. And that's the downside of the pandemic as well. People are forced to be at home and be spoon fed their own dialogue. So propaganda is, yeah, we'll talk about that. we can talk about
sometimes that. And sometimes in the case of we saw in Whose Streets, you have the police department, before giving any details of the murder of Michael Brown, they did their own PR,
right,
where they showed the video of him in the convenience store to try to shape that narrative.
Right.
So you have that, and of course you definitely have the situation where it's focusing on property damage,
right,
instead of what people are out there for, and what the rage and the sorrow is in reaction to. For sure, that's definitely intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, Catlin, we'll talk about it. Shoot me a message, Catlin. We'll talk about it.
It's very polarizing, right? Like that's the way that you disrupt a conversation, is that you make them, you
it's
polarize.
Essentially gaslighting. It's essentially gaslighting. That's what it is. It's professional gaslighting.
Yeah. That's the event Molly Wolf shared in the comments.
Yes.
Okay, so we're almost on our time. So again, thank you so much to both of you and to Richland Library for joining us for this Frame by Frame installment. We're on once a month, usually towards the mid to end of the month. Next month, we're on January 27th, because you all know what's happening on January 20th.
The inauguration.
Missed that week, so we're gonna do January 27th, and I'll be presenting a film called Four Lions. It's an older film. It's actually from 2000 or 1999. No, sorry, 2010. I don't know why.
2010 and 19.
My mind is somewhere else. Anyways, 2010. It is a British director, Christopher Morris. He actually just released a new film called We Shall Overcome. No, I can't remember the name of the new film. Don't quote me on that. But his style is satirical comedy. I really like it. So it's a hilariously dark, heartbreaking film, but really funny.
Looking forward to it.
Right.
About 4 jihadists, Islamic jihadists, Muslim jihadists, in the UK. I will warn you all that it hasn't aged well because their terrorist plot is at a marathon. But I still think that it is worth watching. Because what it does is really bring out kind of this discourse about Islamophobia and terrorism and the surveillance state. So that's what we'll be talking about. I'll be speaking with some leaders in the Muslim activist space. So either some Muslim activists from the US or the director of the I'm Canadian, so the National Muslim Canadian Association that does a lot of work around Islamophobia. So I'd really like to talk about what Islamophobia looks like currently, and then also with an imam from a mosque that has been in Colombia for a very long time, an African-American mosque. So hopefully we can get him on as well, and just to talk about the Muslim community in Colombia, and then also kind of like the Islamophobic backlash that we encounter. But
that sounds fantastic. That sounds wonderful.
Right. I'm here for it.
It's hilarious. Just watch it, even if you can't join the discussion. And of course, you can watch it on Canopy. Canopy's free with your Richland library card. Quick tip: if you don't have a Richland library card, you don't even have to go into the library to get yourself.
That's right. You can sign up for one on our website.
Online. So, and the other thing I really love, I'll just plug with Richland Library's Creative Bug. I've been using it a lot during the lockdown. So there's like these little art classes. So lots of visual, audiovisual stuff for your mind and soul at the Richland Library. And of course, they bring you people like Keith and Crush.
Hey, no, man.
Right. I wish I worked at the Richland Library. That's everyone's dream.
I mean, but you're a part of the conversation. Clearly, you here?
I'm here.
Right.
Well, thank you two again, and
thanks for having me.
And we'll see y'all on the 27th.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Over. We're gonna
2, 3, action.
Hey, you unbelieving kafar bastards. I'm gonna turn you baby.
No.
What?
What's with the gun?
Proper replica, man.
It's too small, man.
Not too small, brother. Big hands.
The way to stop the feds tracking you is very simple. You eat your SIM card.
Can I cook, man?
A total idiot, Soph. I can't even get them to stir the tea without smashing a window.
My plan is, Dave, to put a bomb on a claw. We're way beyond crows now, Fessy.
Answered the call, bro. Training camp, Pakistan.
What? That's a drone. You've got to take it out.
Must have been God's plan.
Come on, Soph. How could that be God's plan?
Well, it can't be God's plan to leave the lads with Barry, can it?
Why do we need a training camp anyway? We're primed. We don't need some tramp up a mountain telling us to set a fuse.
What we're going to do is got a lasting history. Echo through the ages.
Blow something up.
What are we going to blow up, lad?
Internet.
What? Costume. We can disguise the gear in there, and it's perfect.
Waiting for the fun run, lads?
Yeah, we're trying to.
You're going to die in that gear, lads.
It's all for a good cause, though.
Yeah.
It's not going to go off! No, you're confused, bro.
I'm not confused, brother. I just took a picture of my face. It's definitely not my confused face.
What are you doing?
Just in case they're taking pictures.
What?
Barry says you come out blurry.
Take the books off your head.
I'm not showing an image.
Hey, brother,